about what I've played this week.
We're going to talk double speed.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the O3C podcast. My name is Jonathan Dunn. I love video games and I'm joined by somebody else who loves video games. It's my lovely friend, Chris Dow.
Cookies in a jar.
And we are chatting, guess what, about video games.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Announcements. Right.
Yeah.
It's time for the announcements, but they're going to be short and sweet. It's 2023. This show is rolling now in full swing in the second half of this season after our little festive break. And we'd love it if you would consider checking out patreon.com/O3C cents. That's not it. Checking out patreon.com/O3C games and considering pledging just a few pennies a month to help us in this endeavour. There's extra episodes you can get hold of. There's deleted scenes. There's access to full uncut video versions of every single episode this season. And all sorts of other bits and bobs that will sometimes propagate their way to the Patreon feed. Other than that, please do review, rate, share, all the stuff that's going to help us out. It does make us feel really, really quite nice when we see a little message saying, oh, so-and-so liked that. Oh, so-and-so shared that. And if anything, that's worth more than the money. I mean, it's not, but it's still appreciated.
Great, that'll do. We'll have a chat about what, not now, but at some point we can have a chat about what feedback we've had on the Discord about suggestions for other Patreon stuff or different Patreon stuff. My first thought was that I might just keep a log of the deleted scenes and do them as like a monthly episode,
that's
monthly
not a bad
bonus
idea.
episode.
Yeah.
It's like no such thing as a fish do basically like an annual one like that where it'll be like a whole like about 3 hours of all the bits that sort of didn't make it. So I might do that anyway.
Good idea.
We're back. Last week we fed back on our Christmas homework. That was me playing James Bond 2 : Codename : Robocod. Didn't like it. Chris fed back on playing Silver. Did like it.
I did.
Yeah, there we go. That's your too long didn't read of that episode. Saved yourself an hour. This week, though, we are back with our semi-regular Playdate updates. And we've played the latest 2 games in the game series that we have been playing. That is Season 1 of the Playdate games. This week, we are going to be talking about Hyper Meteor and Zipper. Very much looking forward to diving into those. But before we do that, let's... hey, you know what, Chris? Let's check in with each other. What have you played this week?
Not a huge amount, because I've just been playing Babylon's Fall, essentially.
Ah, yes.
It's done. The game is done. I've got the Platinum Trophy. I don't have to pick it up ever again. And in about a month, I won't be able to pick it up ever again. I mean, I could have taken a bit more time over finishing it, as, like I said, at the time of writing, there's about a month or so until it shut down completely. But it was becoming a real, like, millstone. It felt around my neck that every time I went to play something else, I thought, but I could just get another hour done. I could just knock out another 20 minutes or half an hour before I do something else. And it's amazing the sort of psychological damage that comes, for me at least, when there's that sort of time ticker on something. It really made it hard to enjoy other things. So, you know...
like all the work you have to do.
So, like, you know, if there's a series that's going to leave a streaming service, the race to try and get through it, or if an online game like this is shutting down, or if a real life thing or venue or event or something is closing its doors. Like, I know things can't last forever, but there's a very particular set of stresses and anxieties that causes me when it's like there's a thing you could have experienced and now you can't.
Like trying to have sex with your friend who's got cancer.
That's one for the Patreons. Ooh. Now, during the final play session of Babylon's Fall, I knuckled down. I did probably 4 hours in one sitting, one evening, and played till way past my bedtime on a school night. I was just hitting the same stage over and over again to try and grind the materials I needed to upgrade the last few items, because that was all I had left to do for the last few trophies. It felt good to finally see the Platinum Trophy pop up, obviously, and know that I could retire the disc happily. But it was frustrating in a way, because in that time, there was a proper glimmer of what this game could have been. Because as a handful of players are all going for the same Platinum finish that I was, there were enough people playing pretty much all evening that every mission was a full team of 4. And I'd never really experienced that before across the months I'd been playing.
Yeah.
So suddenly the game actually had weapon strategy that was always kind of hinted at. You know, there was actual kind of thought behind saying, oh, you know, well, that person can draw aggro because they're wearing a decent armor set and they can have good defense. And then the people with the big boy hammers can run in and get smashing. And then those with the ranged weapons can stand back and fire from a distance. And equally, like if someone goes down, you've got a chance for a free revival if someone can get to them and get them up. Whereas when you're playing solo, it makes you watch a full 30-second tick down. You know, there's nothing you can do about it. You're just watching the fucking countdown clock for the full 30 seconds before it lets you revive solo. But despite the repetition, it was pretty fun. I think it's a real shame that I only really had this proper design document style experience in my 45th hour of play.
Oh, God.
But, you know, the game is decent, or should I say was decent, past tense. But there are so many missteps in the way it was marketed, in the team behind it, in the matchmaking problems, that I think it was always destined to go out with this sort of whimper. But either way, it is finished. I can play something else. The countdown to now breaking the seal on Sonic Frontiers is on, I'd say.
Excellent. Excellent. Do it.
What about you?
Well, I've played a couple of things this week. I've attempted to keep chipping away at God of War Ragnarok, but honestly, just the pacing is just so slow that it's quite difficult to get enthusiastic about playing it.
Yeah,
exactly. And like the slow pacing is purely down to concessions made to mask loading times on older hardware. Like I tweeted a little section of the game in the last week where you have to move a train trolley onto some tracks, and it only lasts about, I don't know, a minute and a half, something like that. But all you do is move right twice and then left as Atreus just jabbers on about some bunk. And it's entirely emblematic of how this game is built, with these deliberate roadblocks every few minutes to give the next section time to load. And so, I know I've said this before, but it's clear that the priority of this game is to be the most showy offy rather than be the most fun to play. Yeah. And that they could have made this decision to cater for the PS4 version by dialing down some of the, admittedly impressive technical stuff going on. It looks stunning, but it comes at such a cost to the player experience that I just don't think it's justified.
Yeah.
Like Elden Ring is a really good example of this, because the way that game is designed means that actually it doesn't, the improvement you get by playing it on better hardware is just graphical. Like the way the game runs and the way the game plays, it plays pretty much exactly the same on the PS4 as it does on the PS5 as it does on the Steam Deck, but you benefit more by it being prettier. And yeah, the loading times are quicker, but it's because you're going in and out of menus and doing fast traveling and stuff like that. And so like with God of War, I kind of feel that they've been a bit hamstrung by the single continuous shot approach that they decided to continue using from the first game, which I don't think it needed to be adhered to here, because I really loved it in the first game. I think it was really cool. It worked for this like more intimate personal journey that you're going on throughout that game. It is just sort of like one, it is essentially you're walking up a mountain over 20 hours, but like because like the story and the character arcs are developed so much further in this game, and the scope of it is so much larger. Geographically, as much as anything, that you end up with these sections to link the large gaps between action, just so they can retain this single shot. Again, it's something that I don't feel prioritizes gameplay. And, it's frustrating because, when you're doing the combat, it's great. It's really, really good. And the story is interesting. But sorry, I just got a bit lost there. It's frustrating because like when you are doing the combat, it's really good fun. It's really heavy and weighty, and it's satisfying. Solving the environmental puzzles is pretty good fun, although Atreus does interject within seconds of you starting to give you a bit of a hint of what to do next, which is a bit annoying because you just kind of want to stop and just figure it out. And then he'll be like, there's a thing over here. Oh, what's this? Oh, what about over here? And, I don't think we've got the right tools to get through this section yet. And it's like, I'll figure that out. Just give me a minute,
Yeah.
And yeah, the story of the game is really interesting. It's the lore is really interesting, but I just want it to be more of a game than a film. Speaking of which, watch the first episode of The Last of Us on HBO.
Is it better than the game?
Well, it's exactly the same as the game. And it's no surprise to say that I think the story does work much better as a live action piece of media than an interactive one. It looks gorgeous. It's brilliantly acted. It's got exactly the same sort of aesthetic as the film, but with, there's a few things that are changed so that it works better, visually, and it's sort of in a less pulpy way that a video game can get away with. There are shot-for-shot recreations of bits from the game, which again goes to show what the intention was of the game, i.e. try and be a live action piece of cinema. So like the nods that the series does to the game don't jar, because the game was essentially already nodding to this. There's a fair amount of fairly slightly clunky exposition that you're bound to get in the first episode of a new show, but yeah, it's off to a good start, and I'm sure the series will be great. My real highlight of the week, though, has been getting Metroid Prime Trilogy emulating nicely on my Steam Deck.
Oh, and no help from me. I'm normally the tech person. So to hear this is up and running, proud of you. Good job.
Thank you. It didn't require much more than actually what you'd already done, which is because as part of the emulation station setup, one of the cores that you'd installed was Prime Hacks, which is a bespoke emulator purely to emulate Metroid Prime Trilogy, on a modern way. I had a little bit of a pointing in the right direction from my friend Casper, and there's a very helpful Reddit page to assist with the fine tuning, but it's all running just really beautifully, to the point where if Nintendo do ever decide to release a Metroid Prime Trilogy HD remaster on the Switch, I don't think it would be done as well as the Prime Hack community has managed to do here.
This is the thing. Like we say time and time again, the way that actual companies are packaging up older games is so frequently worse than what is available just through hobbyist communities. That it's quite embarrassing, I think, for the actual IP holders and for the platform holders and for the publishers and developers working on these things. Because I realise, perhaps there's time constraints, there might be budgetary constraints, they can't put 5 years of work into one of these little projects. But these people are doing it just in their free time, in their bedrooms. Yeah.
And also, they've already done it.
Yeah.
So reach out to them. If you want it to be done well.
there was... you can probably cut this because I'm thinking on my feet there. There's something recently where an actual fan thing was used. Hang on, George has just come in looking for your phone, I presume, and it's right there on the table.
Thank you.
Right, the recent update to The Witcher 3 with the big kind of big push for textures. I'm pretty sure the majority of those upscaled and redesigned textures were from a fan pack. And they were licensed because it was the work is done. It's going to take us 2 evenings work as opposed to 6 months. So
which will cost less than...
Let's just pay the person. Let's just pay them for their work. Rather than just sending endless cease and desist for this sort of stuff. Just embrace it.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone's done your work for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it is an astonishing job that's been done here. The controls have all been calibrated to modern controller setups and schemes. So I'm playing this with dual stick first person controls with the various visors, beams and mechanics all mapped nicely to, to the buttons of the Steam Deck controller. But I know that you can also play this with a mouse and keyboard on a PC now. Yeah. And it's that's incredible. That is just incredible. All the polygons have been upscaled so it looks nice and crisp. It's running at a solid, stable 60 frames per second in widescreen. And I've started at the beginning with Metroid Prime 1, a game that I've probably completed, I don't know, at least a dozen times. And I'm so much looking forward to replaying Metroid Prime 2, which is a game I only ever completed once back when it was first released. And then I will finally play Metroid Prime 3 for the first time. Because I'd sat, the motion controlled Wii game out, as well as the console too, mostly. And I know that there's going to be a few specific things to bear in mind when I do play Metroid Prime 3 because of the motion control design in the game itself with, there's going to be various controller waggles being necessary for certain moves and mechanics, but I'm hoping to be able to map some of those functions to different, some of the extra buttons on the Steam Deck to minimize any faff. But it'll be fantastic to finally play that, even if it's not quite as smooth an experience as it could be from, like a from the ground up remake, which, Nintendo will absolutely not be doing. But I must say, like, it's been absolutely wonderful to revisit the first Metroid Prime after so many years. It's astonishing how well it holds up. And now that I've got like a much deeper knowledge of the Metroid series and history, there's lots of things that are sticking out to me playing it now that I didn't really appreciate when it first came out, because Metroid Prime was my first Metroid game. So, I didn't really have a full appreciation of the job that Retro Studios, did in successfully adapting Metroid into 3D from 2D. It's quite phenomenal. Like, you look at, that is not a given. It's required a huge amount of thought to get certain things working and feeling right. And, there's so many key aspects of classic Metroid gameplay that you wouldn't expect to work when going from 2D to 3D. But they found a way not only to make it work, but be fun as well. It's really, it's extraordinary. It really is. Like, the mapping system works brilliantly in 3D as well. Allows you to keep track of where you are, where you need to go very easily. The pacing of the progression is a lot tighter than I remember. But it's possibly because, like, my route through the game is probably hardwired into my brain, so I can start checking off bosses and getting upgrades at a fair lick. But it's just a wonderful game to spend time in. It's a wonderful world to spend time in. The atmosphere is just, it's just amazing. These beautifully realized environments and soundscapes. Like, even after 20 years, it still generates this just incredible, just really tactile experience. It's stunning. It's just, if anything, I think I've got, the game, I think, is... my appreciation of the game is grown in the 20 years I've been, enjoying it in my brain. I'm not sure if I'm going to do 100% playthroughs of these games. Certainly not straight.
Go on.
Certainly not straight away, anyway. But, I will certainly play all three of these games to completion, and I'm so excited to be able to keep you regularly updated with how I'm getting on with them, because, absolutely phenomenal stuff. Top drawer work.
It's a play date. It's a play date. That's going there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Right. So, how are we going to intro it today?
Well, you can, if you want, I was just going to give a little thing and then say, and then ask if you've played any side-loaded stuff in the last few weeks. Yeah,
do that.
All right. It's a Playdate. We're back. It's the little yellow console. It's been sat on my desk. It's been kept plugged in so it doesn't lose battery and die. And it's just been nice, just sat on my desk waiting for me to pick it up. I haven't actually played that much since our last Playdate update. Obviously, I did pick it up to play Hyper Meteor and Zipper, which are the two games that we're going to be covering in this episode. But have you played anything else? Have you played anything else on the Playdate? Have you picked up any side-loaded games? I know we did a bit of a recap of some side-loaded games way back in November after it was all after I took it on holiday with me and played a bunch of stuff. But I'm sure there's a whole load of new side-loaded games, independently developed games that haven't been released as part of this first official season that are worth picking up. Have you picked any up? Please say yes.
Oh, yes. I always do.
Oh, good.
Even if I hadn't played them, I would have picked them up. I'm just addicted to the buying, if anything else, of games more than actually getting to sit down and play them. Like I said, Babylon's Fall has taken most of my actual time this week, but the Playdate is perfect then for 5 minutes here and there. And a lot of the best sideload games I've found so far have been ones where you can dip in for just a little chunk, enjoy a puzzle on Slitherlink, or enjoy a conversation in Bloom, or whatever else, rather than having to sit down and say, well, now I need to shift my focus for 45 minutes of something else. So, obviously, we're going to be talking about Hypermeteor and Zipper shortly, but there's two side loads I wanted to mention in particular that I've put quite a lot of time into between, other things this last week or so.
Sides loaded.
Whoa. Now, first up is a Microvania called The King's Dungeon. It's by the same developer who made Almost Tennis that I mentioned on a previous episode. And therefore,
I wasn't listening to that because I don't remember that at all.
And therefore, the design process of this game is documented in full in a mini documentary on YouTube, as with all their games.
Oh,
so
lush.
if you search on YouTube for Squid God, their page will pop up, and all of their videos are a really fascinating insight into the good, bad, and ugly of being a solo developer on a very niche, low-power handheld like the Playdate. So it does go into detail of like, this didn't work and it made me upset, but here's how I solved the problem. There's a lot of kind of small things. And it's interesting to actually hear, we might play a game and go, well, the ladders don't work very well. And then when you hear someone talk about the problems they had making a ladder function at all, you're like, no, okay, I'll cut them a bit more slack in the future. The King's Dungeon aims to try and give players the experience of a full Metroidvania with all of its item gating and hidden secrets, but in a 20 or 25 minute speed runnable package.
Nice.
And it's not perfect by any means. Like I said, it's a single guy doing this, and it does have its own quirks and bugs. And the developer has been very open to feedback. Like I had a conversation with them via Reddit, I think, sort of passing on some of my thoughts that they then folded into a future update. So I can say I've had a hand in some way at influencing a Playdate project.
You made a game.
But it works, and it's a lot of fun. The game's got 2 different maps now in its current format. Each one uses the same power-ups and obstacles, but are presented in kind of a different layout to keep things fresh. A first play, I think, of either map takes about 25 minutes, like I said. And then a second play to find all of the collectibles might be a little bit quicker because you kind of know where things are. But then the fun for me, at least, has been in trying to bring down my times bit by bit, because when you finish, you get a nice little sort of recap of how long it took you, as well as a little message that will say new best time if you've beat what you did previously. And that's been enough to make me sit down and want to shave off another minute here and there where I'm, having a prolonged perch on the poo pot or something like that, where it's just where you're just entertaining yourself. And the Playdate's perfect for that, as we've mentioned before.
Jesus, what an image.
It's only a few dollars, and providing you know what you're getting, that it is a small game, it is something you're meant to replay, it is something that will have the odd little quirk here and there. I think it's a really good time. The other game I've played a fair whack is a high score chaser called Fish and Feathers. And it riffs directly on the Puro or Bird and Beans minigames that were in WarioWare. So you might need to think back to those. If that sounds like nonsense to any of you out there, in both Fish and Feathers or in its inspiration Bird and Beans, you control a character who can move left and right, and you must collect or avoid falling items from the sky, with the catch being that you can only do so by extending, in the original game, your tongue, and in this game, a fishing rod that your character has swallowed in a diagonal line directly from your character. So you have to think about angles. The higher in the sky you grab the item, the higher the score. If you miss a drop, it will gradually destroy the platform you're stood on. And that means that if you're not careful, you can end up stranded on a small plank just a few pixels wide. Now, if this was just a straight copy of Bird and Beans, I probably would have enjoyed it anyway. But there's additional strategy here, which I think makes it a much better game, because certain falling items, which are all fish in this case, hence the title, certain ones will repair a single block of terrain. Others will repair multiple blocks of terrain whilst destroying everything in the sky. Some will blow up larger areas if you ignore them. They hit the floor, meaning that there is a proper strategy to how you need to approach everything that's falling towards you. On the train to London the other day, I played this game for a full 90 minutes. Like, I had intended to get stuck into one of this week's actual season entries for this podcast. But for my taste, I actually think this game is better than both of them. Obviously, we'll talk about both those games shortly, and I think they are very good, but I just enjoyed this more. Like, the main game uses the D-pad and buttons, so it isn't particularly Playdate-centric, but after reaching a certain score threshold, you do unlock an advanced mode, and in that you use the crank to move a little analog turret that then lets you hoover fish out of the sky instead of firing a fishing line out. And it totally changes the gameplay, and then suddenly feels closer to like an arcade game like Missile Command as you manage your limited hoover charges with this like more granular input. There's even, and this is really nice for me because I like this sort of stuff, an inventory to fill, which acts kind of like in-game achievements.
Wonderful.
So certain fish will only fall once you meet in-game targets, and then when you manage to catch a new fish, you get a little portrait, you get a bit of flavor text, and then it will sort of log how many of them you catch going forwards. Like, it's a very small thing, but it makes it feel like a better, bigger, more complete game. It's just, I don't know. I really enjoy that sort of stuff. It just has like a level of care in it that you might not see otherwise if it was just a quick like flash game you might have played on the internet years back. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the game's challenges, and I'm hopeful with more practice, because it is really tough as you get into it, that this could be another game I add to the completion list for 2023, because I like beating sort of niche stuff. And because this is so easy to pick up and play for literally 2 minutes whilst in between other things, I think it will probably be sat here on my desk ready to go for quite some time. All in all, beautiful game. For what it's aiming to do, I basically have no notes. So I would highly, highly recommend anyone who likes arcade score chasing games and owns a Playdate to get on itch.io and search for Fish and Feathers, because I give it a big thumbs up.
Fish apostrophe N. Fish and Feathers.
To search for Fish apostrophe Feathers.
Fish and Feathers.
You can glue that together.
Yeah, I can.
Right. You're going to tell us about Hypermeteor?
Yeah. Just found an Instagram profile called Fish and Feathers. It's not
X-rated.
It's not great. It's not X-rated, thank God, but it's not great.
Fish-rated.
It's X-ray. There we. I really want to check out. I want to check out both of them, to be honest.
They're good.
You know, it's been really nice picking up the Playdate again and just reminding myself of, like we said before, the little hole in our gaming activity that the Playdate fills that other things don't, you know?
Yeah.
It's lovely. It's really lovely. Should we chat about the... Hang on a minute. Look this up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Shall we chat about the 6th week of releases in the first season of the Playdate?
Yeah, does that mean we're halfway through? Are there 12 weeks total?
Yeah.
Because they were, I think there's 24 games. So yeah, I think this is the halfway margin. The halfway mark.
There we go. We're halfway through chatting. Yeah. Yes, it is the halfway point.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. And, well, I'll kick it off. Hypermeteor.
Oh.
That was the 11th game to land on my Playdate. And it's pretty much exactly the sort of game you would expect to get on the console. It's a play on the classic arcade game Asteroids, where you have control of a ship in space. And asteroids, or I assume probably meteors, because this game is called Hypermeteor, they're flying at you, and you need to destroy them. In Asteroids, you can fire your weapon to break them down, but in Hypermeteor, you are the weapon. Because the asteroids, or meteors, that spawn into your area, they are split into two sides, a light side and a dark side. And if you ram your ship into the light side, then you will successfully break it. However, if you ram into the dark side, you will be successfully broken.
Oh.
The asteroids are spinning, of course, at varying rates, which makes aiming at the correct side more of a challenge. And, the bigger ones split into smaller ones, and the smaller ones split into littler ones until there are no more. And you basically try and go for as long as you can. I imagine this game started probably just as an exercise to make an Asteroids clone. And then the team at Vertex Pop decided to put a bit of a new twist on it. But it is a simple score-chasing game, albeit presented, honestly, very, very well, with nice, crisp graphics and effects, a really nice little soundtrack. This being a Playdate game, it's obviously using the crank. And that's part of your control input. You use the crank to rotate the spacecraft, and then you use a button to boost and a button to drop a smart bomb to blow up the screen if you get caught in a pinch. It's got this sort of typically floaty feel to it that something like Asteroids does, which makes cranking feel a bit, a bit of a clumsier way to steer rather than just like a D-pad or analog controls. Yeah. But it's honestly fine once you get used to it. Having played quite a few mobile games and other bits and pieces in my time away from the Playdate since our last update, one thing I do miss is haptic feedback when I'm playing the Playdate.
Yeah.
which I think would go a long way to improving the way some of these games feel, give them a bit more of a tactile, responsive feel to them.
Yeah.
But, who knows if that might be an addition to the Playdate Mark II, if ever that comes about with its backlit screen. But like we've said before with these games, like it's easy to underestimate how hard it is to get a game feeling polished and stable on any console, but certainly on something as new and as different as the Playdate. And, it's just a 3-person team who made this game, and they've done a fantastic job of making just a really classy little product here. So even though like score chasing games aren't necessarily my particular brand of bag, this is one of the better ones on the console. I think it's really tight. It does what it does. It's very, like I said, it's tight, it's classy. It feels like it's more of a you game than a me game. So how did you get on with this game?
Well, I think it's interesting to view this, like you said, in the context of Asteroids especially. Because if you go back in time, like in the golden age of arcade games, there were loads of, I guess, iterative games. And by iterative, I don't mean straight sequels so much as just outright copies with minor tweaks. So, when things got big, everyone was trying to make their own Space Invaders or Donkey Kong or Pac-Man or Asteroids because that's what was popular.
Yeah.
And these days, games often pay homage to existing titles or gameplay ideas and stuff like that. But it's rare that a team just puts out a straight Asteroid pseudo-sequel like this, because that's essentially what it is. This is not a slight against the game at all. But because games are as evolved as they are in 2023, everything will naturally draw from something, but rarely like this blatantly direct in one specific point in time or one specific product. But luckily then, as you've kind of alluded to, it's good that this is a pretty good version of Asteroids, all said and done. Like Asteroids, if you play the original game, remarkably, still holds up very well in an arcade setting, especially. Like if you play it via a console port or on one of the many Atari collections we've had over the years, sometimes you might kind of shrug a little bit. But when you've got an original cabinet in front of you, it's a lot of fun because they've got this super futuristic vector display that means 40 plus years after its release, it still looks sci-fi. It still looks high tech and kind of bizarrely next gen, but just it's no gen. Nothing's ever going to look like that again. And the gameplay itself is still really satisfying to learn and master because of that inertia and screen wrapping that Meteor has too, which means that as soon as you start moving, you're never fully in control again. Like even very good players, you are always balancing. You're always balancing against things that are out of your control, and it can be quite fun to sit at this sort of periphery of panic for like a whole play session for just like a minute or so. Yeah. Now, obviously, Meteor can't lean on the gimmick of a vector display because we're using the Playdate. So instead, it does things with its hardware, which is intelligent and it still feels cool. And the way that we move with the crank still, I think, captures a lot of that unwieldiness whilst giving you a decent level of control once you get the hang of it. So it is just Asteroids. It does, it's trying to just iterate on something that already exists. But even without being able to shoot, it still feels like an arcade shooter because it is very much, it's got the same DNA in it, essentially. The combination of its visual design and its musical design, it really puts me in mind of Super Hexagon. And even though the play style between the games is quite different naturally, what it really did, more than anything else, is made me really yearn for Terry Kavanagh to develop a game on the Playdate.
I had exactly the same thought. Yeah.
And if he hasn't been approached by Panic for whatever Season 2 might look like, I think it's a huge missed trick because he's the right level, I think, of indie developer. And he always takes on a project that does something different. And I think, you can imagine a game like VVV, where you're altering gravity, maybe using a crank, or some sort of Twitch-based score chaser like Super Hexagon with full analog crank control. He's exactly the sort of ideas-based designer that I think would really enjoy this device and probably enjoy Meteor himself too, I reckon. Compared to the other high score games we've already covered on the device so far, I think this comfortably beats out Whitewater Wipeout, as it just has more to master, more to do, more moment by moment decision making. And I think it's just got a cooler vibe all round. But I don't think I personally enjoy it quite as much as Flipper Lifter, because I think that game had that cutesy character that really grabbed me, very similar to Fish and Feathers that I've already talked about today, to be honest. I think it stimulates something similar in my brain. But the start of a really strong week, I think, because it is a very, very solid game.
It is. It is indeed. I tell you the thing that took me the longest to get used to is the fact that the meteors don't bounce off each other.
Yes. I wonder, though, because you are marginally hamstrung by the way you were moving with the crank. It's not like quite as immediate as other buttons might have been. It might be to kind of soften that for you, so you're not suddenly overwhelmed and have like unwinnable states.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I know.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I think there's a sense of anticipation you have to have, like you said, about like getting your grasp on the balance of the controls. And no matter how much I played it for probably an hour, and I never got used to. I was always anticipating the meteors to bounce off each other.
Yeah.
But again, like we've said with many things, it's probably a me problem. Moving on then, let's talk about the other game that was released this week. It's called Zipper. I'm going to let Chris tell you about it, but I'm going to preface it by saying it's my favourite game on the Playdate. Go, Chris.
Zipper is a weird game. It is. It's a stylish samurai game. It's made by a chap called Bennett Foddy, who is an affable Australian developer behind games like the Bananas Quap, which is an old Flash game where you have to run a sprint whilst controlling the muscle groups of your character's legs fully independently. And more recently, people might be more aware of a game called Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. And it's kind of a Twitch stream courting, rage-inducing pain-em-up, where you're trying to maneuver a man constrained to a big old cauldron using a big hammer. Both games make sense to see, though maybe not to describe.
Yeah.
But they're interesting. They are interesting things. And I think, again, like mentioning Terry Kavanagh, it's a person with a vision for the things he makes. I think Zipper, out of the ones I've had experience of, might be the most gamey game that Bennett Foddy has ever put out, at least to my knowledge, because it's essentially a turn-based action game where you control a samurai who can zip several spaces in one direction across a grid, slicing enemies in half when you pass directly adjacent to them. Now, the game seems like it's going to be easy peasy lemon squeezy on screen one, as you just have a big long straight line zip which will mince through a nicely squelchy ninja. But within moments of the game starting to open up, like literally 15 seconds later, you start realizing that this is a challenging, contemplative take on action games that places a huge onus on your position and planning in order to navigate irregular grids and, more crucially, the movements of enemies. Now, the real twist here comes from your movements being asynchronously mirrored by the enemies. So if you move, say, 10 spaces in one direction, any enemies that you have not taken out with your blade's motion then have 10 kind of movement tokens to use themselves, but in any direction. So that means each screen is a puzzle, figuring out where you need to juke or ferry your samurai in order to take out your foes, but also to make sure that wherever you end up is going to leave yourself kind of shielded from attacks once you've come to a stop. If an enemy is able to reach you on their turn, you are dead, and it is an instant game over.
Yeah.
I'll just say that again. It is an instant game over. Now, luckily then, the old Playdate crank comes to the rescue because it allows you to play a ghostly version of events before you commit to your zip. So you can sort of plan where you're going to go. You can then turn the crank and it will tell you, is that enemy going to end up somewhere useful? Are they going to end up killing me because they're going to then walk up to me because of the way that I've plotted my route? Is it worth me first shimmying a step to the right before kind of unleashing my blade? Is that going to be better for me? So much of samurai films is in the quiet before the sudden strike. And I think Zipper manages to capture the magic of something like Kurosawa's films, not only because it's stark one bit black and white, but also for the way it's a deep breath of a game rather than a shinobi style slash 'em up. It makes a huge difference.
I on that point, that is one, absolutely superb observation. Two, I cannot overstate just what an extraordinary achievement it is to reach that.
Yeah.
With this game, with this tech, it is ridiculous.
So as you progress through Zipper's world, you've got secrets, you've got branching paths, you'll start to have enemies who will parry, you've got enemies with ranged attacks, like all sorts of things will get gradually added. But you're also fighting against an ever-depleting life bar that rewards longer movements by virtue of every zip, no matter how long it is, expending energy. So you need to essentially try and do fewer longer zips rather than more shorter zips, if that makes sense. It's a very good game. It's a very hard game. It's a very, very punishing game, but it's a thoughtful game. And I think that's what I appreciated more than anything else. Like, if this was just hard for the sake of it, and it was purely about my skill, then I think I would have got very frustrated very quickly.
Yeah.
But to fail, but think, no, I could have just looked what was going to happen. I failed because I haven't taken the time to think what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, the error is entirely on my fault. It's entirely down to me. That's makes it worth persevering with. It reminds me most of isometric puzzle games from the ZX Spectrum.
Yeah.
Like Night Law or the Batman adventure game that I know you observed your eldest brother playing as a young.
Yeah.
But the movement in this totally sets it apart from pretty much anything I've ever played. And you could try and say that the turn-based movement is not a million miles away from, say, a hyperspeed version of Fire Emblem or Disgaea, because it's like taking turns to move.
Yeah.
But the movement projection with the crank totally sets it apart from those more traditional strategy RPGs, because it's not just you have a go, they have a go. They're essentially happening concurrently, but you have that kind of foresight to say, well, I can see what's going to happen before I make my move. It's really good. How did you get on?
I mean, I absolutely love it. I
Good.
absolutely love it. It is possibly my favourite game on the Playdate. I think it's just so brilliantly executed. I think one of the reasons why I love stealth games, you know, I've spoken before about how much I love Thief and how, you know, I love Dishonored, and even something like Sekiro. I like the fact that you can take your time and approach situations and wait, and then strike when you absolutely know what's, you know, that you've got your ducks in a line. And this game is all that. I love the fact that you're not on a timer to make your moves. That would have ruined it. That would have ruined it for me. And like you said, the only thing that's going to let you down is not taking enough time.
Yeah.
You know, you've got everything you need to get through every single scenario. And yet I haven't got to the end.
No, it's brutal.
Yeah, it is. It is. Like you said, it's one mistake and you're out. But it's like you said, it's a simple concept, but it's just so brilliantly realised. The graphics and the aesthetics are absolutely stunning. I mean, the whole way the game is presented, like we said, it's got that. I mean, the note I wrote down is it's got a real vibe to it.
Yeah.
And it captures that magic of Kurosawa. It captures, like you said, the importance of the stillness and the quiet that something like Ghost of Tsushima, with all of its tech and budget and everything on the PS5, does not do for me, because it's trying to do too much. It hasn't got what's actually important, the essence of, you know, what makes those old movies so special. Whereas this does, and that's ridiculous. That this is a tiny little 1-bit console with a crank without a backlight, and yet it makes me feel more. It reminds me more of Seven Samurai than, you know, Ghost of Tsushima did. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It kept me company during my last day in hospital. It was the game that had dropped when I was last admitted, when I ended up having my appendix out.
Not fun.
That was not fun. That was not fun. But it was. So it's got a bit of an association with that. Certainly, seeing multiple blades rip holes in the sides of multiple people.
Set you up.
Yeah,
set you up nicely.
I was ready for it. I mean, I didn't want to overstep the mark, but I was giving the surgeon notes beforehand.
Did you just tell him, just crank it forwards first? Just make sure you're confident with that incision before you go ahead.
That was it. That was basically it.
On a side note, this can be a deleted scene. I have an incredibly strong association with the film Elf and being sick to the point of death with salmonella. Because when I got salmonella as a kid, I had rented, I think it was like 3 films for $5 from Blockbuster. One of them was Elf. I don't know why. I don't even remember the other 2. But I was so unwell for that kind of week period where it's like, I cannot eat, I cannot drink. It's just coming straight out. Nothing is going to stay in me. And I was just sat there. It's like, well, I don't want to get up because that hurts. So I'll just press play again. And I must have seen Elf like 15 times across that week. But now I don't think I've watched it since. And that was when I was like, I don't know, I think I was about 18 when I had salmonella. So it was
Yeah.
right back when I was at college. Horrendous.
Awful.
Wouldn't recommend it at
Awful.
all. Unless you
No.
want quick weight loss, because I did drop almost 2 stone in a week and a half.
That'll do it. That'll do
do
it.
it.
That'll do
That
it.
will
Every
do it.
cloud.
Yeah,
Every
yeah.
cloud.
Think of the positives.
For someone like me that doesn't really like, I don't like strategy games.
Yeah.
Those comparison points you made with like Fire Emblem and Disgaea, I think are absolutely spot on. And yet Zipper, I really, really like because I think it's because of that function that, like I said, you can take your time, you can consider things. One of the reasons why I get so pissed off with strategy games is because I can't think 3-4 steps ahead.
Yeah.
And this nullifies the need to do that, because all you need to do is essentially play 1 step ahead, and you can see that. You don't need to go, okay, you don't need to try and figure out exactly how somebody else is going to move, because you can see it. You can see it, and then you can make your decision. And it's just, it's extraordinary. I think it's an extraordinary achievement. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's a real highlight for me so far in the Playdate oeuvre. It's a brilliant use of the hardware. It's a great example of creative problem solving. I think the fact that you can't do a fast-paced action samurai game is absolutely the reason why you've got this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it works so brilliantly. It works absolutely brilliantly. Marvelous vision, and brilliantly, perfectly executed.
I would go as far to say that this has been collectively the strongest Playdate week.
I think you're probably right. I think, Kranken's Time Travel Adventure and Boogie Loops, the second week, I think is a very strong week.
Yeah.
But then also, this is, I think this is classier.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for what the games are doing, it's nice to have a counterpoint in what's released. And I think they have largely been quite good at offering kind of very much a kind of vice versa experience each time, that it's like, you might not enjoy this, but you'll probably enjoy this. So they kind of do different things. And you could see that even like from week 1, it's like, okay, Whitewater Wipeout, you play for 5 minutes, get a score, done for now. Or sit down and play something that's a few hours long that you can get a bit stuck into to casual birder. Yeah. And I think this is like that again. It's like you can really pour over Zipper. You can spend a lot of time on each move. But if you're at a point where you're like, I can't really see a solution to this stage, I need to go away and do something else, you've got a 5-minute play on Hyper Meteor. And I think that is a good pairing. I think it does work really nicely. And like you say, stylish. It's a week of vibes. Week of vibes.
It is a week of vibes. Good vibes. Next Playdate update. Well, I'm quite excited because this was the last time that I played my Playdate games as they came out, because I think it was around about this time that we decided what we were going to do with. It was when these games came out that we decided what we were going to do with this season.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, I'm gonna knock it. I'm gonna knock the games on the head as they come out, so I can keep them fresh for reporting back on them.
Yeah.
For future Playdate updates. So I'm really looking forward to playing the next 2 games, because I haven't played them at all. The next 2 games are Questy Chess and Executive Golf DX. And I don't know anything about them. Questy Chess is billed as a role-playing chess simulator.
Yep.
I've just said I really don't like chess. We'll see how I get on with this. There's a really good game I played on iPhone. I think is it called like Really Bad Chess or something like that? Or
I don't know. I'm not sure of that one.
Hang on, let me check it out. Before I mention this. It's called Really Bad Chess, and it is very similar in its sort of tone to What the Golf, which is a golf game made by people who don't know what golf is. And Really Bad Chess is basically that for chess. I'm hoping that this isn't as... I'm hoping that it's fun. It isn't just chess. I'm hoping that it's got a fun sort of spin on it that's going to make it accessible and enjoyable to someone like me. Executive Golf DX has got some of the best artwork I've ever seen, because it is simply a photo of an office in what looks like 1984, 85, something like that. It's the most boring photo you can possibly imagine. and I'm excited to see how that plays into to what the game actually is. Again, these are two games that could be serious vibes.
Yeah, I hope Executive Golf is a winner, because I've mentioned previously, I think this is made by Mixolumia's Dave Makes. And as far
yes.
I've never played anything else that they've been involved in, so I'm quite excited to see how they put their kind of talents to a very different idea, since I regard Mixolumia so highly.
Well, tune in 2 weeks' time to find out. Not you.
I'll be here.
Oh, good. So there we go. That was our latest Playdate update. We were talking about Hyper Meteor and Zipper, among some other things as well. Next week, as we announced last week, we are going to be taking a little bit of a break from our Fortnite challenges to give us to free up our gaming time to play some other things. So next week will be a little bit of a stopgap. It's going to be a full-length "What Are You Playing?" episode, where we're going to be telling you everything about what we've been playing. Stay tuned for updates on Metroid Prime Trilogy. Stay tuned for, well, we know that Chris isn't going to be playing any more Babylon's Fall. So,
yes, it's done.
So we're all looking forward to hearing what he's actually going to play. If you want to check out more of our stuff, you can do that. O3C.games. That's our website. It's our central repository for all of our content. There's articles, reviews, think pieces, video content. There's the back catalogue of our entire suite of podcasts. There's bonus. There's video. There's videos. There's documentaries. There's streaming content. It's absolutely butt tons of stuff. Check it out. If that's not enough, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/O3C Games. There's loads of additional content, even more than that. There's loads of stuff in exchange for a few pounds of pledging every month. It goes a long, long way to helping us keep the show going, and you will get an absolute just dick ton of stuff in exchange.
We all like a dick ton.
You can chat to us on social media. We are at O3C Games on pretty much everything. You can chat to us individually as well. I'm on Twitter at Jonathan Dunn.
I'm still at Chaz_Hodges.
And we will see you back here same time next week for more video games.
Video games. Video games. Video
Brilliant.
games.